This was supposed to be a simple build, but oh boy, was I in for a treat. A vintage kit, charming right? This means lots of putty, sanding, and just when I thought I had everything, I discovered some parts were simply missing. I even added an interior no one will ever see, and somehow the back of this tank now reminds me of a cute little Pokemon. But did I keep it simple? Of course not. I like to suffer. I added metal tracks, a metal barrel, scratch built some details, plus my first attempt at casting parts. What could possibly go wrong? And all those sandbags. Were they worth it? Honestly, I wasn't sure this build would ever end. I apologize for the overly aggressive logo. I like it. Sue me. Actually, don't sue me. In any case, today we're building the Tamiya Semovente M4075 in 1/35 scale. That's a mouthful, right? It's a very old kit. Some might call it vintage. I think the tooling is from 1975. That's pretty old if you ask me. It even increased in value, and today I am going to totally ruin it. Although, not intentionally. While inspecting the spruce, I noticed a sprocket was missing. I don't even know why. Luckily, I bought a spare set to go with the Fryo model tracks, so this time I got off on easy mode. Even for a kit from 1975, Tamiya was already a boss in the space. The quality of the parts are really well done. Plastic is nice and the details are very good. As you guys might have noticed, some of the sprues are already unpacked. I for one suffer from inspecting, opening and unwrapping newly bought kit syndrome. Sounds familiar? Enough of the rambling. Let's do this. I like to prepare my builds and sort all the parts based on the instruction steps in the manual. This way I get familiar with the parts and spot problems in the early stage, at least some of them. It also helps to mark the sprues for easy identification. You can also use a label if that's your thing. Most of the time I use a cheap side cutter to roughly remove all the parts from the sprues. Later I remove the attachment points with a high-end single blade nipper, which is a real game changer if you ask me. This reduces the amount of sanding or working with a blade with a huge amount, which makes me very happy. I kept working my way through cutting all the parts. I like to remove all the parts and prepare all of them before starting the actual build. This is a bit boring, but makes building much more efficient, which saves some time in the end. But on the upside, it really helps in getting familiar with the parts, the vehicle and the build. I usually look at my reference as well during this step and make notes in the manual. So after cutting all the parts from the sprues, I sort them in these neat plastic boxes. Now I'm actually ready to get building. So with this out of the way, it's time for a little montage. So after preparing all the parts, it was time to dry fit everything. And to my surprise, everything had a very good and tight fit. This is amazing to me if you think about how old this kit actually is. So on with the build. The interior is pretty basic. I decided to keep things simple as well, since much of it wouldn't be visible afterwards anyway. At first I wanted to improve and scratch build some parts, like the ammo racks, but immediately decided it was way too much work for this build. I then decided to do some serious surgery on the ammo racks. The holes were all over the place, but at least it looked a bit better than before. I will have to train on my drilling skills. After placing the parts, I decided to fill some sinkholes, which were quite evident on the hull floor. I also gave all the sig marks beneath the fenders a generous coat of putty. They will probably not be visible anyway after installing the tracks, but I didn't want to take any risks. Little did I know, this would take some serious time to get everything smooth. Next build, I probably dumped some mud texture on it. Since there were no details provided for the front of the interior, I decided to at least hide the ugly gap. This was easily fixed by adding a short piece of styrene sheet. So, on to the real stuff. The barrel provided in the kit was very basic, so I decided to upgrade it with a metal one. I first glued the two halves of the kit parts together and melted it with plastic cement. The barrel turned out to be on the small side, but eventually I didn't have any problems gluing it in place. Very tactical. So, barrel in, turret next. Easy, right? Right? But before we dive into the horrors of sig marks, I discovered some weird holes on the back of the turret. After some research, I discovered that they were present on references as well. Do any of you guys know what these are? Anyway, there were so many sig marks on the inside of this turret that I quickly questioned all of my life decisions. I also made quite a mess of it, and honestly, I have to see if this was worth my time. With the interior done, it was time to seal things up. Closing the hull should have felt like progress, but instead it felt like opening a new can of sanding. But before we get to this, for some reason I had a third metal sprocket in my stash. Don't ask. Since I wouldn't be using it in another project, I decided to glue it in the back to add some weight to the model. I guess that's one way to make it slightly useful. The upper hull didn't immediately glue in place with the lower part. I had to use multiple passes of cement. Maybe this was due to the fact that it's a very old kit, I don't know. The clamps kept everything nice and snug while I was able to glue the parts. I then decided to fill the seams where the fenders met the lower hull. I later realized this was a mistake. On references I found a panel line could be visible here as well. So yeah, this meant even more sanding was ahead. At this point, I'm just filing away my free time. After all the sanding, I moved over to the side of the vehicle. On the spot where the exhaust will be fitted, there were some weird large gaps that needed filling. Before I could move on, I had to rescribe the panel lines of the engine covers, which were destroyed during sanding. Cute face or not, this tank still needs to move. So, it's time to get this thing rolling. Pun intended. So next up, wheels. Many wheels. Luckily, the most boring part was already done during our 2-minute 80s montage. Amazing how fast things can go when you speed them up. Although the reference I used is a restored vehicle, the rubber road wheels had some serious damage on them. To somewhat replicate this, I made little dents and cuts using a new hobby blade. I cleaned them afterwards with Tamiya Extra Thin cement. When everything was dry, I assembled the road wheels onto the suspension bars. This went together really well and without any problems. Obviously, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. A montage of me building metal tracks, link by link, with some relaxed deep house music underneath. Let's go. After cleaning and drilling out all the links and making small sub-assemblies, it was time for a test fit. Fitted all very nicely. After that, I needed to clean up all the pins after cutting them. Everything was fitting perfectly. Maybe a bit too perfect. I swear, my girlfriend was already eyeing it for her next bracelet. Jokes aside, I managed to secure my tracks from the wifey and proceed with the build. Putting together the Fryer model tracks and sprockets was a breeze. Finally, something went smooth. Although it was not entirely 100% smooth since the fit was a bit too tight. This was an easy fix though. I just added an extra link to both sides of the tracks. This created a bit too much sag to my taste, but luckily I was able to find some references online with some very saggy tracks on the Semoventes. Now I was able to sleep well at night, knowing I do not look like a complete idiot. Continuing with the build, it was time to add all of the exterior details. Nothing fancy here. Most work was adding all of the remaining kit parts. I only did some small modifications since this kit is pretty old and was lacking some obvious details. The first modification I added were the tail lights to the rear of the vehicle. I used some evergreen plastic tubing for this. Maybe they were a bit out of scale, but at least it is better than nothing. But that face, I could not get it out of my head when I saw it. I also added some rivets to the exhausts. These were also way too big. Please be easy on me. This is my first build in a long time. I later sanded them down to be less obvious, but still add some detail. Next up, vehicle stowage. I began with creating tarps from a thin cleaning towel soaked in white glue. I figured recreating them with paper would give the best result for rolled up tarps. To be honest, the whole thing looked way too stiff and unnatural to me. And later I decided to redo them, create the tarps from greased up putty. But this will be for another video. On top I added some jerry cans and a box. The jerry cans were placed like in the reference I had, and the box was my own addition in order to keep things interesting. So, this is the final result so far. It is actually beginning to look like something. The reference I had sandbags all over the front plate. Since this project and kit was the beginning of all things, I figured I might as well add them and make them myself. I mean, why finish your first project quick and easy and out of the box, while instead you have the option of torturing yourself, right? The sandbags were created from standard milliputty. I am no prodigy sculptor, so I kept things simple. Most details wouldn't be visible in this skill anyway. That's my official excuse, of course. Please direct your complaints elsewhere. Did I do a great job? I don't know. I definitely need to practice on this much more. The result was okay for a first time, I guess. Or at least I hope. The reference showed more jerry cans than there were provided in the kit. And since I was already making my life extremely difficult with this build, I thought I'd try out a new technique. I wanted to try out the blue stuff and make copies of the original kit parts. There are many tutorials online for this, so I won't go into the details here. After softening the material in hot water, I pressed the parts in firmly. After a while the material hardened and I had myself a nice set of jerrycan molds. Now it was time for the real work. After removing the kit parts, I filled them with standard milliput and let them dry overnight. At first everything seemed fine, but it was at this point I was starting to get doubts. All the parts were totally ruined. I don't exactly know what happened, but I probably pressed the putty too hard and therefore widening the mold. I don't know. But this is where the dream ends. Well, we don't throw away money around here. That stuff is expensive. Okay, let's pretend that didn't happen. So maybe casting isn't my thing, but the model still deserved to be finished. I gave the sub-assemblies a quick wash with soapy water and started assembling everything. After all the drama, it actually felt great putting it all together. What's supposed to be a simple and easy build turned into a monster of a project. Especially considering that this was my first project in a very long time. I really am interested in your experiences with this. Did you ever start a kit that was supposed to be simple but ended up taking you way longer than expected? Share your stories in the comments. Let's heal this pain together down below. Looking back, I really underestimated it all. Although the kit was simple and didn't have many parts, it was still quite old and needed some modifications. At least according to my brain. I guess it's easy to get carried away by your ideas, but in reality, It usually requires more work and one thing leads to another. And that's the last piece. We actually made it. If you stuck around through sanding trauma, blink tracks and Pokemon tanks, you're basically family now. Hit subscribe and we'll build the next one together. Sometimes what starts as a simple project turns into an adventure. And that is exactly what life is about. Thank you for watching and see you all in the next one.